Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are learning Mishna Bava Kamma, Parak Gimel, Chapter 3, Mishnah Test, Mishnah 9. Okay. Sure. Now, so our Mishnah is talking about, this whole Mishnah, though it doesn't specify it, is talking about a situation of a shar tam, a shar that has not yet established the habit of damaging, and therefore the owner pays half damages. So the Mishnah says like this. Now, we're going to go through a number of different scenarios here. Shar shava maneh shenagach shar shava masayim. You have an ox worth 100 zuz, $100, whatever makes it more convenient. A ox that's worth 100, shenagach shar shava masayim, that gores an ox and kills an ox, without just damaging. We're talking about kills an ox that is worth 200 zuz. Okay, you got that?
Mm-hmm.
Again, the damaging ox is worth 100. The ox that got killed was worth 200. Okay, now, if I just stop here and ask you, so the person who owned the damaging ox, how much does he have to pay for his damages?
100.
100. Right? Chatzi nezek. Half the damage. But but now I'm going to get into another discussion, which is going to start the discussion. Ve'eina nevela yafa klum, and the carcass is not worth anything. Meaning, if the carcass, as we're going to see, was worth something, it actually means that the person that got damaged still has value, and that is going to be deducted from what you would call what you would look at in the loss. So ve'eina nevela yafa klum, and the carcass is worth nothing. In which case the loss is 200 zuz, of which we just said, the damager, the owner of the ox that damage, has to pay 100. What happens here? Neiteles hashar. The person who got damaged takes the entire damaging ox because it happens to be worth the amount he is owed. Meaning, he is owed $100 from the owner of the ox. So says the Mishnah, you know what you can do? You can take the ox. It's worth 100, take the ox. So as they bring down here in the notes, the Tana of this Mishnah says that the victim takes the ox, i.e. he is entitled to seize the ox itself, because he holds that the damaging ox automatically becomes a property of the victim. If the damaging ox is worth more than the amount owed, the victim acquires a share in the ox that matches the amount he is owed. He thus becomes a joint owner of the ox together with the damager. They may sell the ox and divide the money according to each one's share. So if it basically the whole ox is going to be, the whole damaging ox equals the payment, you have a right to seize the ox. Because according to this Tana, you become the owner. It's not just like he owes you this money. You have a right to take the ox. And if it comes out, as he said, that the damaging ox is worth more than the amount owed, then you own a share in the ox. And then practically speaking, you're going to sell it and then get the money. Okay, so that's the first case of the Mishnah. Now, the next case of the Mishnah, we need a little introduction. The Torah states regarding the payment that must be made when a tam gores and kills another animal, they, the damager and the victim, shall sell the living ox, which means the one that gored, that did the damaging, and divide its money in half. Okay? Those are the words. You sell the living the shar that's alive, and you divide the money in half. The verse means that half the value of the living ox is kept by its owner, and half goes to the victim. Okay, that's the meaning here. The Mishnah gives an example of the type of case to which this verse refers, and it's actually going to be a bit of a machlokes. So we have here the following: Shar shaveh masayim shenagach shar shaveh masayim ve'eina nevela yafa klum. A tam that is worth 100 gores and kills another ox that's worth 200, and the carcass has no value, 0. Amar Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Meir, al zeh nemar, regarding this, the Torah states, umachru es hashar hachai v'chatzu es kaspoi. This is where the Torah says they shall sell the living ox and divide its money in half. Since the damager owes the victim 100 zuz, which is half the damage, and the living ox is worth 200 zuz, the victim is entitled to half the value of the living ox. In order to pay the victim, the damager may sell the living ox and give half of the money to the victim. Follow that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now, they bring down here in the notes, the verse must refer to a case in which the two oxen are worth the same, because only then is the victim's payment, which is half the value of the ox that died, the same as the value of the ox that gored.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, then, they sell the living ox and the victim takes half of the money. Okay? That works. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda said to him, V'chein halacha. That's the halacha. You are right. If the circumstances would be what you just said, that would be the halacha. That you would sell the animal that's alive, meaning the animal that did the goring, and you split the money. But now the problem is, Rabbi Yehuda, Kiyamta umachras hashar achai v'chatzu es kasbai. You have fulfilled, meaning you have explained that which the Torah states, and they sell the living shar and split its money. But the other half of the pasuk you haven't explained. But like kiyamta, but you haven't fulfilled, meaning you haven't explained the second half of the pasuk that reads v'games hashmei sechatzun, that they also divide the animal that died. Now, in your case, there's no value to the animal that died. So there's no dividing up there. What is the fulfillment of that? How do we explain that case? The Ezer. So what's the case for that? Says Rabbi Yehuda, here we go. Ze shar shavamasayim shanagach shar shavamasayim. An ox that's worth 200, gored an ox that's worth 200. Again, gored and killed it. Banavela yafa chamishim zuz. And the carcass is worth 50 zuz. Shazeh noita, I'm just going to read the words now. Shazeh noita chatzi achai v'chatzi ames. In this case, one takes half the living animal, half the dead animal. V'zeh noita chatzi achai v'chatzi ames. And this one takes half the living animal and half the dead animal. Okay, so what does this mean here? So here we go. The point is like this. Let me read to you here how they explain it. To what then does the verse refer? It refers to an ox worth 200 zuz, that Gordon killed another ox worth 200 zuz, and the carcass is worth 50 zuz. Okay? Now, in this case, the victim loses how much? 200 minus 50. Yeah. Right? The animal that he lost was worth 200, but the carcass is worth 50. So what is his loss? 150. Mm-hmm. Therefore, the damager who pays half the loss must give the victim how much?
125? No.
Well, you're jumping the gun, right? Yeah. How much? The damager who pays half the loss must give the victim 75 zuz, right? If the total loss is 150, yeah, he's got to give him 75. Yeah. Now, the carcass belongs to the victim, but that's the halacha, essentially. But for the sake of arranging the payment, this is the point. They may sell both the living ox and the carcass and divide the money as follows. The damager takes half the value of the living ox, which is 100 zuz, and half the value of the carcass, which is 25 zuz, making a total of 125. Yeah. Likewise, the victim takes half the value of the living ox, which is 100 zuz, and half the value of the carcass, which is 50 zuz, so that he too ends up with 125 zuz. Mm-hmm. The victim is 125 zuz is equivalent to half of his loss, which was 75, remember? Together with the entire value of the carcass, which is 50, because that belongs to him, which was his anyway. He has thus been paid for half of the loss. Meaning, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Torah is telling you how you can cover everything, right? How you can cover it. That's how you cover everything. And let me just read here how they a little bit elaborate more in the notes. The arrangement can be made wherever the two oxen are worth the same. The value of the carcass is irrelevant. The amount of 50 zuz is just an example. The victim loses the difference between the value of his ox when it was alive, right, which he lost, and the value of the carcass, which he keeps. Mm-hmm. Since the ox that gored is a tam, the damager pays the victim only half of this difference. This half payment is the same as half the value of the ox that died minus half the value of its carcass. The payment can therefore be made in the following way. The damager sells the living ox, which is worth the same as the ox that died, and gives half the money to the victim. The victim sells the carcass and gives half the money to the damager. The victim thus ends up with the amount that is due him, half the value of his ox, half the value of his ox minus half the value of the carcass. Right. According to Rabbi Yehuda, this is the arrangement to which the verse refers when it says, they shall sell the living ox and divide money in half, and the dead one too they shall divide in half. It all works out. But again, it's more like a practical how to deal with it, a practical way of how to deal with it. Now, Reb Meir, so what does he do? I mean, the whole point of Rabbi Yehuda was, what do you do with the other half of the pasuk, Reb Meir? So the Gemara, I'm not going to get into right now. The Gemara talks about how he deals with it, because essentially, according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Reb Meir, right? Meaning, what does Reb Meir do in the case where the no, I shouldn't say that. Okay. Again, Reb Meir's case didn't explain the other half. What does he do with the other half? Yeah. I mean, for some reason, he doesn't want to learn the pasuk like this. He wants to learn the pasuk is talking about his case, where the goring animal and the nevela are worth the same. The goring animal is worth 200. The loss of the animal that died was 200, and the carcass not worth anything. That's how he wants to learn the pasuk. What does he do with the words? And they also divide the carcass. He has to deal with that, as the Gemara talks about. But he doesn't. This is how he wants to learn the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda says how he learns the pasuk, how he learns the verse. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.